right, so as we wrap up this section about the structure of DNA, we're going to talk very, very briefly about viruses. Because viruses are not considered living things, but they can obviously do a lot of damage to cells. So one of the experiments we talked about earlier in this chapter was the experiment where they were looking at viruses, bacteriophages, specifically viruses that infected bacteria. And I explained that viruses are very simple. They really only have two main parts, a protein coating. Sometimes there's an outer coating outside of that as well. And then inside they have nucleic acid. Now the viruses in the experiment we were talking about at that time, the bacteriophages, they had DNA. But technically viruses don't have to have DNA. They have to have nucleic acid, but it doesn't have to be DNA specifically. So one of the things I've seen on the AP exam is where they ask you to figure out what kind of virus something is based on what nucleic acid it has inside. So this is one of the ways we could classify viruses, is by what kind of nucleic acid is found inside of them. So there are four possibilities. They can either have double-stranded DNA, which is exactly what we have, where like A connects to T and G connects to C, and the DNA has two sides. They can also have double-stranded RNA. Now that's not something that we normally have in our cells, but some viruses hold their genetic information as double-stranded RNA, which means, I realize we haven't talked about RNA, we're about to talk about RNA in the next section, but RNA is very similar to DNA. It has a different sugar, ribose, and it has the base U, uracil, instead of the base T. So a double-stranded RNA virus, it would have two sides, but A's would connect to U's, and then G would connect to C. A third option is that they might have single-stranded DNA, which again is not something that eukaryotes have, but a virus could have single-stranded DNA. So it has A, G, C, T, T, etc., and there's no matching side to that. And then the fourth option is that it's single-stranded RNA. So again, it has only one side, and it has A, but it doesn't have T, it has U's. So this is not an official classification system of viruses. Just to explain, there are all kinds of viruses, coronaviruses and retroviruses, and there's all kinds of classification systems. But specifically what we're looking at right now is determining what type of nucleic acid the virus has. Is it double-stranded DNA, single-stranded DNA, double-stranded RNA, or single-stranded RNA? So the first thing is to figure out if it's DNA or RNA. So that's very simple. What they're going to give you is a list of what bases the virus has, what nitrogen bases. If you see it has A, T, G, and C as its nitrogen bases, then it's a DNA virus. If it has A, U, G, and C, then it must be an RNA virus. Now to figure out if it's single-stranded or double-stranded, that's also very simple. If it is double-stranded, either double-stranded DNA or double-stranded RNA, then the amounts of the bases that connect to each other will be the same. In other words, if it's double-stranded DNA, the amount of A will be equal to T because they connect to one another, and G would equal C. And the same is true if it's double-stranded RNA. The amount of A will be equal to U, and G will be equal to C. If it's single-stranded, then it will have the four bases, but they will be in four completely different amounts because there's no reason for any of them to be equal to one another since they don't connect to one another. So if this sounds a little bit confusing, let me just show you two examples, and you'll see this is actually quite easy. So step one, is it a DNA virus or an RNA virus? So here's my percents. They add up to 100. And I see that it's got U, so now I know this one has to be an RNA virus. Now look at our second one. This one doesn't have U, it has T, so this has to be a DNA virus. Step two, we got to figure out if they're single-stranded or double-stranded. So notice on our first virus how the amount of A and U are the same, and G and C are the same. That tells me this is a double-stranded RNA virus because the reason they're the same, just like in DNA, is because the A is connecting to the U and G's are connecting to C's. And so for every A, there's going to be a U. So the amounts are going to be equal to one another. So this is double-stranded RNA. This one, notice how the 4 amounts are completely different from one another. So this has to be single-stranded DNA. So that is how you can tell what kind of nucleic acid a particular virus has.